Well, hello there, everybody. I'm Jonathan Trotter. Welcome back to the Digging in the Dirt podcast. It is such a privilege to spend this Friday mid-morning with you. In Missouri, it is warming up, but all of the flowers are blooming, and my daughter's sunflowers, the red ones and the yellow ones, I didn't know they came in red, are blooming. And I'm excited because in this episode, I get to read to you from my book, Digging in the Dirt. Um, a fun one called the Missionary Life Cycle. So I'm curious to see if you see yourself in any of these stages. Maybe you don't live overseas or abroad, but maybe you've seen some folks who do. And I wonder if you've watched people go through these stages, or maybe you've heard about it. You might not have read about it in the newsletters because some of this stuff doesn't actually make it into the newsletters, but that's probably a story for a different time. So, again, welcome to the Digging in the Dirt podcast. Let's dive in. This is from the book Digging in the Dirt. It's called The Missionary Life Cycle in 5 Stages. I'm starting on page 37. Like any really useful assessment, these 5 stages are totally made up. There are no peer-reviewed studies parsing these 5 stages of cross-cultural work. There is no quantified objective data set. Still, please feel free to say you're in stage 3, wing 4. That would make me happy. We'll look at the 2 options within each stage. We'll list some common statements you might hear from folks taking each option, and then we'll look at some primary goals for each stage. Let me pause here and just say, when I wrote this, some of it's fun, some of it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but some of it is also designed to say, okay, hey, if you're in this stage, here are some of the goals for that, or here's maybe some of the things to watch out for. So, all right, here we go. Back to the book. Pre-field. That is the idealist / ignorant. So again, those are the 2 options. You know the idealist, right? If you're on the field, you probably were one once. We need the idealist. Often, the idealism of youth or new belief motivates people to the field in the first place, and that's not bad. In fact, idealism is a fantastic place to start. It's just not a fantastic place to stay. Idealism is not what's dangerous. Ignorance is. The main difference here is that the ignorant person doesn't know what it is that they don't know, and it's a lot. The idealist knows they don't know everything, so they're safer. The idealist is a daydreamer, aware of the reality around them, while the ignorant is lost in a fantasy dream world in the dark, unaware that their sick child is vomiting in the bathroom down the hall, and their wife has been up 3 times already, and the dog just peed on the clean laundry. Yeah, ignorance is dangerous. Let me pause here for a second. When I used to work in the ER, there was a doctor who said, the eye doesn't see what the mind doesn't know. And so he was talking about that because I was, sometimes at the triage desk in the ER, assessing people coming in. And what he was saying was, if you don't know that something's even possible in your head, you don't even have that knowledge, then the eye doesn't really even see it. The eye can't piece together those random data points and come up with a possible diagnosis. You just don't see what the mind doesn't know. And as I was reading back over this, I think that's what we're talking about here, is that for the ignorant person or for the idealist, they just don't see because they don't have the knowledge. Of course, the danger is for the ignorant. The idealist knows what it is that they don't know. All right, back to the book. Things you might hear the idealist say. This is all so amazing. God's going to do amazing new prophetic things in this glorious season of fresh wind. He is calling the nations to himself, and he's calling me to the nations. Will you donate? Things you might hear the ignorant say. I don't need a sending church or an organization or agency. I read a book and I feel super called. Also, I served a person once on a short-term trip, and now I am going to save the world. Will you donate? Goals for this stage. Don't be ignorant. Protect your ideals while purposefully listening to the reality of some who've gone before you. You are not the first person God has called across cultures. and you will not be the last. All right, arrival to year 2. This is the learner/survivor. Landing in a foreign place will sometimes feel like just trying to survive, and that's okay. But if the functional goal for your first term is just to survive your first term, you're a survivor and not a learner. A learner is an idealist who's landed. They don't know stuff, but they're super excited to find out. They don't even know how to ask for stuff, but they're going to find out. They don't know who's who and what's where and when's good, but they know how to breathe, ask around, walk the street, and learn. The learner's goal is to figure stuff out, to learn about a culture, a history, to meet new people, to make new memories. The survivor's goal is to not die. So things you might hear the learner say, I don't know where to buy milk. Let me find someone to ask. Things you might hear the survivor say, I don't know where to buy milk, but as soon as I find out, I'm buying 9 gallons so I don't have to go back out on the street again for at least a week. Shoot, where do I buy a refrigerator? Goals for this stage. Learn as much as you can about language, culture, workers who've come before you, the state of the local church before your arrival, etc. Recognize your need for mentors and find some, expats and nationals. Year 2 to year 7, established or / workaholic. Getting established in a foreign field is quite an accomplishment. You know the language now, and you're driven to finally start doing the work you've been called to do. At this stage, folks start to realize that they can't do as much as they thought they could. They start to get overwhelmed by the complexity of the culture because now they're starting to really see much more of the culture. The established will face a crisis, and the risk is that they respond by turning into workaholics, shouldering all the responsibility for all the souls all the time. Now, things you might hear the established say, there's so much work to be done. We should get involved in mobilizing local believers. Things you might hear the workaholics say, there's so much work to be done, and if we don't do it all, who will? Goals for this stage. See the task for the size that it is without succumbing to depression or despondency. Disciple others into the roles to which God is calling them, remembering the axiom that the resources are in the harvest. Year 7 to year 99. So the options here are experienced or pessimistic. The experienced are those folks who've got tons of knowledge. They've been around the block. They've seen a lot of folks come and go. They've probably had ministry initiatives succeed, and they've probably had more fail, but they stayed. And they're relatively happy. Their words are nuanced and balanced, and the workers themselves are fairly enjoyable to be around. To the pessimist, however, everything new is bad, and everything old is bad because everything is bad. These folks are a little harder to be around unless you are them. Then they're easy to chill with. So things you might hear the experienced say, well, that could work, but the few times we tried it that way, it didn't work. Do you want to talk about some alternatives? Things you might hear the pessimists say. Let me pause here. I have all those asterisks and dollar signs and everything in there. I'm not sure how to say that in a read aloud here. So things you might hear the pessimists say, bleep. Sure, try that. It won't work. Just like what we tried didn't work, because nothing will work. This ground is rocky and hard, and I want to leave, but I'm too worried about what people will say about me, and I haven't saved enough to retire. Goals for this stage. Nurture the idealists, mentor the learners, caution the workaholics, avoid the pessimists. Right? Learner / know-it-all. If you're in this stage, you knew we'd come back to this. If you've been around long enough, you knew the earlier discussion about being a learner was too perfunctory. Congrats. You know a lot more now than when you started. But if you're healthy, You also know how much you don't know, and so you'll still be a learner. Someone who's been on the field a long time without being a learner is dangerous. They have a lot of experience, but it's dated. Some of it will, of course, be accurate, but it won't be tinted with the wisdom that combines age old knowledge with present tense reality. When we arrived in Phnom Penh, Cambodia in 2012, someone told us that you couldn't get fresh milk in country. So for the first month, we drank UHT milk, which is an abomination. I'll never forget the day, a few months in, I went to the grocery store and saw rows and rows and rows of fresh, refrigerated, amazing milk, skim, whole, 2%, and chocolate. Even if you do know everything today, you won't tomorrow. And you don't know everything today. So, goals for this stage: don't be a jerk. Be willing to ask questions, even of the younger people. And even if you've been on the field for longer than they've been alive, share your wisdom and experience with those who will listen. There will be some who will listen. Find them and offer yourself. Conclusion: whatever stage you're in, welcome. May I offer a few ways we could make this whole cross-cultural life and ministry thing more enjoyable and more effective? We need to nurture the idealists while cautioning the ignorant. Don't treat them the same because they're not. We need to mentor the learners, helping them to find milk and refrigerators. It's not their fault they don't know stuff. And while we're at it, we can help the survivors too with a little extra encouragement that not only is surviving possible, but so is thriving. We need to encourage the established. They've been on the field long enough to know the size of the job, but they might not have been around long enough to see the resources at their disposal, which might include you, whether you've been on the field longer than they have or less than they have. We need to listen to the experienced. As the saying goes, get experience as cheaply as you can, for many people have paid a high price for it and will gladly give it away for free. Let me pause. I'm going to repeat that because I love this quote so much. I'm not sure, but I think it is attributed to Benjamin Franklin. Anyway, so back to the book. I will repeat this phrase. As the saying goes, get experience as cheaply as you can, for many people have paid a high price for it and will gladly give it away for free. And lastly, we need to keep learning, all of us, all the time. If this comes naturally to you, awesome. Please help others. If this does not come naturally to you, you might want to do some pondering on the phrase growth mindset. This missionary life of serving others and sharing the gospel is too hard, too good, and too important to forget these things. All right, that was the chapter in Digging in the Dirt called The Missionary Life Cycle in 5 stages. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I love interacting with folks, so feel free if you've got a question or a comment, or you want to make sure that we address something on this podcast in future episodes, drop me a message or a comment on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube, or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or shoot me an email, Facebook message, or something like that. I love interacting and hearing what's going on in your guys' lives and what might be helpful for you. We have 2 more chapters in the missions section of Digging in the Dirt, and then we start looking at fun stuff like emotions, like anger and grief and lament and all that kind of stuff. That's the middle section of Digging in the Dirt, and then the last section of Digging in the Dirt is like life in the mud. So it's a variety of things talking about kind of when it all hits the fan and what we can do for that. So I think that's it. I'll wrap up here and say, as I typically do, go with God.